Well, this is a good transition, actually, into something you've been reporting on a lot, which is the potential responses from Congress. And I was going to say members of the left in Congress, but actually Senator Rand Paul joined in a vote that happened just last night. We want to start, though, with a clip of Bernie Sanders kind of talking about it. And maybe, Ryan, you could set this up.
Right. So this is Senator Bernie Sanders talking to Jake Tapper about a resolution that he forced onto the Senate floor last night, that all it would have done is required the State Department to take 30 days and to study the question of whether or not Israel is violating human rights with U.S. weapons. We'll talk about how that vote went on the Senate floor first. But first, here's Bernie Sanders talking to Jake Tapper.
The spokesman for the National Security Council, John Kirby, responded to your plan saying, quote, "We do not believe that this resolution is the right vehicle to address these issues, and we don't think now is the right time. The Israelis have indicated they are preparing to transition their operations to a much lower intensity, and we believe that that transition will be helpful both in terms of reducing civilian casualties as well as increasing humanitarian assistance," unquote. What do you say to that?
I strongly disagree. Jake, we have got to, as Americans, take a very deep breath. What is going on in Gaza right now is a horrendous humanitarian catastrophe. We're looking at 23,000 people who have been killed, almost 60,000 have been wounded, and 2/3 of the people who have been killed are women and children. You're looking at 70% of the housing units in Gaza that have been destroyed. Jake, if I use the word Dresden, Germany to you, you think about the horrific destruction during World War II of that city. What is going on in Gaza now in 3 months is worse than what took place in Dresden over a 2-year period. This is a catastrophe. And now, according to the United Nations, after you have 1.9 million people displaced from their homes, they don't have food, they don't have water, they don't have medical equipment, they don't have fuel. What you are looking at is imminent starvation. Children are starving to death. So my view has been from the beginning, Israel has a right to respond to this horrific terrorist attack from Hamas. But you do not have a right to go to war against an entire people, women and children.
So, Ryan, that was, to your point, before Congress actually voted on this. What can you tell us about what was on the table as they went to vote yesterday, late last night, actually?
Right. So, and also, so the UN, to back up what Bernie Sanders is saying about starvation, UN Special Rapporteur put out a joint statement yesterday saying, currently every single person in Gaza is hungry. A quarter of the population are starving and struggling to find food and drinkable water, and famine is imminent. And so they put it on were you surprised to see Rand Paul? I wasn't.
No, not at all. And actually, I wasn't surprised specifically because when we had our discussion with him, what was that, about a month ago now? Maybe a little longer than a month ago. I felt like he was really engaging with the questions that you were tossing at him.
He was pretty critical and willing to be thinking pretty openly about this.
Right. And I feel like he's generally one of the standouts in the Republican Party when it comes to looking at our Middle Eastern policy and all of that. So not entirely surprising, although given how intense the sort of party line has been in the last couple of months on this one, I mean, vote your conscience. It's impressive always.
So there were about 11 people whose consciences told them to vote with Bernie Sanders. Here, if we can put the next element up there. LaFonza Butler, the new member of new senator from California, Martin Heinrich, Mazie Hirono, Ben Ray Lujan, Ed Markey, Jeff Merkley, Rand Paul, Bernie, of course, Chris Van Hollen, Elizabeth Warren, Peter Welch. Chris Van Hollen, probably the most important vote there, because he and Chris Murphy are kind of collectively the two most respected Democrats in the Senate at the State Department. Like if you're a State Department official, you want the approval and you kind of fear the disapproval of both Murphy and Van Hollen. And so to have Van Hollen vote for that will be noticed in Foggy Bottom. Van Hollen and Merkley both just were at the Rafah border crossing in Gaza. Van Hollen came back Van Hollen and Merkley both came back incensed at what they had seen there and said that Israel is deliberately withholding humanitarian aid and sparking what the UN's describing as famine conditions.
So the vote was 72-11. And Ryan, I think that
Where's
means
everybody else?
I was just going to
A bunch
say,
of Republicans not there because was it Democrats who missed it? I can look, but
it's an interesting question.
A bunch of Republicans had missed a couple other votes.
This happened at 8 p.m.
Yeah.
last night, so on a Tuesday night. And so 72 to 11, it's pretty resounding no. And again, the element we just had up on the screen was a tweet. And the way that it was put there is the Senate just voted 70 to 11 to kill Senator Sanders' resolution to have the State Department report Israel's human rights abuses against Palestinians. And Ryan, though, what you're saying is that it's a little different even than that. It's a little softer even than that. It's not so much a report Israel's human rights abuses, it's report on potential.
Yeah.
It's,
Are they happening?
Investigate.
Yeah. Are they doing anything wrong? Kirby's response is interesting. He's saying, we don't need to do this because Israel has assured us that at some point in the near future, it's going to slow down its attack. But back in Israel, the politicians are saying the opposite. Like they're saying that this isn't stopping.
Right.
And the only reason it would stop is if the United States kind of used its leverage to pressure it to stop. And I think that in the long run, this is not going to be beneficial to Israel either. And its friends and allies who kind of enabled it in this moment are not doing Israel a favor.
Now, tell us about this Haaretz report. We can put this up on the screen, where this is the first paragraph of the report. The Jewish Culture Department of the Ministry of Education has walked back its agreement to help fund an annual Shavuot event that took place in 2023, organized by the Megiddo Regional Council due to Israeli Arab broadcast journalist Lucy Arisha's participation as the event's host. I am in shock, she told Haaretz. It's so hurtful to me, especially at the time we find ourselves in right now. After October 7th, there's no other word for it except racism and sullying my good name. What's going on here, Ryan?
There is a racist bloc that has significant power inside the Israeli government at this point. Like when we say that this is the most far-right Israeli government in Israeli history, it's not hyperbole. Like that, the Israeli government itself would say that is the case, and there is a faction within that coalition that believes things that here in the United States are just abhorrent and repellent, such as a woman who represents mixed marriage cannot represent Jewish culture, according to this element of the ministry, and it's as the spotlight shines on some of these practices, because the world is now paying so much close attention. The claim that Israel often uses in its defense, that it is this beacon of democracy, it's the only democracy in the Middle East, begins to fall apart. Because if you're the only democracy in the Middle East, what is this? Like this, we do not associate this type of state action with democracy.
And they're saying, okay, regarding the event, appears that there was a failure in communication between the director and the supervisor, because just going full bureaucracy, because the publication went to the group without receiving the approval of the supervisor. According to the procedures, the activity can't be approved. So we'll see how that unfolds going forward.
Hopefully the attention gets them to backtrack on this.
But to your point, I mean, it is actually a really interesting question post-October 7th, when tensions are as high as they are in Israel. Are they able to withstand the intense pressures and suspicions and, yes, racism that exists, and proceed in sort of seemingly democratic, banal machinations like hosting a speaker at a government event? I mean, this is a very interesting sort of flare-up, I think, culturally.
Yeah. And we also wanted to play this clip from the European Parliament, from an Irish member of Parliament yesterday, who she's a controversial figure within the European Parliament, and I think, but this clip of her denouncing both Biden and Israel has gone wildly viral.
Despite the catastrophic death toll it has inflicted, Israel is losing on the ground and in the court of public opinion. There's no way that this ends that doesn't leave Israel a pariah state with occupation and apartheid on borrowed time, and they know it. So they're doing everything they can, desperate acts of aggression to provoke a wider conflict with Lebanon, with Iran, with anybody, to draw in the US, to save them from the consequences of their own actions. And as Yemen shows, Butcher Biden is reporting for duty. With Europe's proud genocide by his side, they are the ones who have enabled the continuation of Israeli terror. Without them, it would already be over. So take note, Butcher Biden. The ancestors of the Ireland that you claim to be from disown you. Keep our country out of your mouth. And as for von der Leyen and genocidal Germany, with your words and deeds supporting Israel in the ICJ, not in our name. The people of Europe stand with Palestine and with South Africa.
Particularly harsh words for Biden, Ryan, given that when Biden visited the Middle East as president, he specifically said that he can empathize with the plight of the Palestinians because he is Irish.
Mm-hmm. He's very proud of his Irish heritage. When he was, right after he was won the election, a BBC reporter shouted out to him, you know, President Biden, BBC, BBC. And he turned around and he's like, BBC? I'm Irish. What are you I'm not talking to the BBC.
Yeah.
And he was steeped in this tradition. He once, in a speech, said that he was told that one of his ancestors was in the Molly Maguires, which is like this kind of mining kind of terror group.
Right.
And he said later they heard that was not true, and he said they were all disappointed because they wished it was true, because the Molly Maguires are total folk heroes among kind of Irish Catholics in Pennsylvania and in that region where he's from. So yeah, to have him called Butcher Biden, which is a very Irish kind of phrasing, and denounced in those strong terms, you know, probably lands, even if it's not from, you know, the very top of the Irish government.
Going after Germany too there, also quite nervous.
Yeah, she doesn't spare anybody in general.
No,
Yeah.
The harsh words all around.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.